Now you got an audience.
Yeah, let's get started, everyone. Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us today, and welcome to the Streets for All Monterey Park City Council Candidate Mobility Debate. My name is Katrina Kaiser. I'm on the steering committee for Streets for All, and this is one of our first events on behalf of, the Monterey Park elections, not on behalf of, but we're working in this area. So if you'd like to learn more about what we do as an organization, please go to streetsforall.org. I'll start by handing it off to one of our colleagues from the San Gabriel Valley, Jae-Sho Yang. Next slide.
Okay, so just waiting for the next slide.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that.
Next slide. Yeah, so my name is Jae-Sho Yang. I've been working a lot in transportation, partly in Monterey Park as well. And I am a San Gabriel Valley resident, more than happy to be here. Really excited to talk a little bit more about mobility in terms of context and history, specifically Monterey Park. Next slide. So, Monterey Park's transportation system. This system affects not only how we get around, but also influences the health of our residents and determines how much of our city's impact on the environment is. Concerning the health of our residents, we know that the greater Los Angeles region has the unfortunate distinction of leading the nation in smog and ozone, particulate pollution. In fact, the American Lung Association's 2022 report ranked the LA region dead last for ozone pollution, 5th last for average annual particle pollution, and 8th worst for daily fine particle pollution. Most of this pollution comes from vehicle tailpipes, as well as vehicle tires and road asphalt that get pulverized into these fine particles during use. In short, cars and driving are the source of most of our air pollution. Asthma, heart disease, and preterm births rise when people are exposed to high levels of car pollution. Just by breathing this poor air quality, we're smoking up to 4 cigarettes a day. And we can't allow ourselves to forget that young children breathe in this pollution, especially schools next to the freeway like Markville High School, Margarita Elementary, who live right next to the 10, one of the most busiest freeways in the LA region. Next slide.
Did we lose Jae-Sho?
Oh, he just appeared back in the waiting room.
Hi, so sorry about that. Some technical issues here. So, car collisions. Besides the health impact on our lungs, we know that car collisions pose a routine and all too common danger to public health and safety. Right here in Monterey Park, we have failed to protect the health of our pedestrians. It has actually gotten worse. According to the State Office of Traffic Safety, which ranks cities against peer cities of a similar population size using police traffic reports, Monterey Park experienced 44 incidents of cars killing or severely injuring pedestrians in 2019, making us the 5th worst out of 105 cities in our peer group. As you can see in this table here, our city's performance on this ranking was nothing to be proud of for the 2 preceding years either. According to the National Center for Injury Prevention and Control, motor vehicle crashes are the leading cause of death for children between the ages of 10 to 14 and young adults between the ages of 15 to 24 in the United States. Traffic violence is even higher within communities of color and people experiencing homelessness. Some cities, such as Los Angeles, have committed to Vision Zero, or reaching 0 annual traffic deaths by the year of 2025. However, this goal has not been adopted by Monterey Park. Next slide. Statewide, the California Air Resources Board estimates that 41% of our planet warming greenhouse gas emissions come from the transportation sector. Transportation is actually the largest source of greenhouse gases out of any sector in our economy. In 2012, the Monterey Park City Council passed the Climate Action Plan, committing the city to a 15% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2020. As of 2012, the Climate Action Plan noted that 63% of Monterey Park's greenhouse gas emissions can be attributed to transportation activities. This means that transportation is an even bigger culprit of global warming as a proportion of our city's pollution compared to the statewide average. The Climate Action Plan also recommends that Monterey Park address its main source of emission by making significant improvements in managing transportation demand, by incentivizing walking and biking, and by expanding mass transit services. More than 12 years since the passage of Monterey Park's so-called Climate Action Plan, almost none of these recommendations have been implemented at scale. Next slide. I'll pass it back to Katrina. Oh, Katrina, you're muted.
Thanks, Jay Show. Next, we're going to go into the candidate opening statements. The way this is going to work is each candidate's going to have a couple minutes to introduce themselves. You'll see the timer on the screen. And then if you see the names at the bottom of the screen, the name that is underlined indicates the candidate who goes first. When you introduce yourself, please make sure to say what district you're running for the voters to know. And we'll get started with Thomas.
Well, thanks for inviting us and hosting this very important discussion. I appreciate being here. My name is Thomas Long. I'm a candidate for the 1st district in Monterey Park, which is kind of the western and northwest part of the city of Monterey Park. I have served the city of Monterey Park for almost the last 15 years as both a city commissioner on the city's environmental commission and for about 10 years now as a representative for the city on the San Gabriel Valley Municipal Watershed Board. Much of my work and my career has been dedicated to climate and environmental advocacy work and advocacy on other public policy issues. And first got introduced to public policy and government by being appointed to the city's environmental commission and learning about some of these issues. In fact, was on the city commission advocating for the passage of the Climate Action Plan back in 2012. And have not, to a certain extent, not totally surprised that nothing has been done or very little has been done in terms of making progress on the Climate Action Plan and the strategies that were laid out and the tactics that were laid out in that plan. So look forward to discussion here and hoping to be able to represent the city here that I grew up in, was born and raised in, to continue to address sustainability issues as a city council member, but also addressing other issues that are impacting our quality of life here, and look forward to the discussion here and as the campaign continues in the months to come.
Thanks, Thomas. Next, we'll turn it over to Delario, who I think is calling in by phone. I think while we're waiting for Delario to come back, let's move forward and turn it over to Jose.
All right. Thank you, and good evening, everyone. My name is Jose Sanchez, and I'm a candidate for City Council in Monterey Park District 3. District 3 is on the southern side of Monterey Park along the 60 corridor. And I just wanted to also Streets for All are hosting this debate tonight, and for the work that you do throughout the San Gabriel Valley and LA. We really appreciate the work that you do. Just to kind of introduce myself, for those who might not know me, I'm an educator, a teacher in the area. I have for the last 17 years. So I teach and I serve a lot of the families that I hope to represent as a city council member. Some of the things that I do as an educator that I hope to bring to the city council, increasing civic awareness among my students. Some of you guys might remember in 2018, my students drafted gun control legislation, the only students in the country to have done so, and introduced by Congresswoman Judy Chu as House Resolution 1076. They also drafted an immigration law in the city of Alhambra to protect some of our most vulnerable citizens, right, our immigrants. But I hope, I'm also a teacher by trade, and as a result, I'm also a union representative, and so an activist. I have been a union member my entire life, and as a union member, I've been active within our union is very active in the community, having created a pantry for residents during the pandemic to help families who are suffering from food situations. And we also created a lot of rallies, including our one for our LGBTQ community. But I hope that as a city council representative, I can continue to represent families and students in this area. I know that there's a lot of traffic issues. I live by ELAC and Flora, and we have a lot of traffic issues in this area. So I hope that my involvement with Streets for All in the future and as a city council member will help improve a lot of our quality of life here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jose. Delario, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, hi. Good evening, I'm Delario Robinson. I really appreciate being a part of this Zoom conference on transportation here in the city of Monterey Park. Formerly served as a business consultant here locally. Also for 9 years, I was president of the Democratic Club, Monterey Park Democratic Club here in the city. Also served as planning commissioner and planning chairperson for 4 years. And before that, I was economic development commissioner. So for me, the city of Monterey Park has probably been a project for me for the 20 years that I have served here in Monterey Park as commissioner, president of the Democratic Club. Before that, I was I taught at high school at Centennial as track coach, also Thompson College, Southwest College, and Los Angeles City College. Also at Los Angeles, I served as the president of the Los Angeles Council of Churches and head of the Community Issues Division before that. So I have an extensive career, so to speak, in public service and volunteerism. So I'm very concerned about the city. I'm running for city council in the District 5, and I hope that it's successful. I know I have a candidate that I'm running against that's very successful himself, but may the best man win. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Delario. And last but not least, Finn.
Thank you. Thank you for having us tonight. And thank you, Delario, for those praise words. So my background is such that I'm an avid volunteer in the community. I grew up in Monterey Park in 1979. I've been here since. I went to Garvey, Monterey Vista, Garvey, Marquepo, then USC. I came back, I lived there. I lived all my life between Monterey Park and Rosemead for a couple of years, but I'm really just a few blocks away. My plans for the city include safety, pedestrian safety, bike safety, vehicle safety. We got to fix our buildings, we got to fix our city infrastructures, and we got to fix the streets. And the other thing we need to do, the second thing we need to do actually, is the revitalization of downtown Monterey Park. It's old, it's been like that for about 25 years from what I remember. So we need to kind of beef it up a little bit, be competitive, draw some people to come and spend money so we can increase our tax revenues. You look at Alhambra, San Gabriel, Rosemead, they're doing that now. And it all started with Old Town Pasadena back about 25, 30 years ago. The other thing we need to do in terms of growing our city is facilitate career training for youth so that people can get jobs. And last but not least, I'm here to be a voice for our residents, figure out what needs to be done. Part of this due diligence, I've been in 9 of the 10 commissions meetings multiple times, just trying to figure out what their issues are and what the challenges are, and bridging and connecting everyone together so that we can work as a group. Currently on the Garvey School Board. I've served on the Garvey School Board for 5 years now. I'm on the Garvey Ed Foundation, raising tens of thousands of dollars each year for the last 9 years or so. And I'm on the Chinatown Service Center Board as the vice president, which brings the vaccine and the testing to the city of Monterey Park during the pandemic.
Thanks, Finn. I think now we're going to jump into the next set of candidate questions. The way this is going to work is you'll see the question on screen, everyone's name's at the bottom, and then a timer on the screen just as before.
Sorry, it's coming back up. I had to really quickly fix something.
Yeah, we're adding an option
Got it.
for audience questions, and you'll see the link at the top.
I'm not able to access the screen still. Got a phone.
Everyone's able to see that?
No.
I think Delario's on his phone only, but I see the audience questions. For those of you in the audience, you can go to the link at the top of the screen and ask your audience questions there. You'll also have the opportunity to upvote or downvote your fellow audience members' questions, and we'll ask them at the end. Delario, since you don't have access to the video, what we'll also do is read out the question when it comes time for you to speak.
Oh, that sounds great. Yes.
All right. First question is a softball. Do you believe that the time has come for the San Gabriel Valley to think differently about transportation? What do you see yourself doing if elected to change things? And we'll start with Delario.
Of course. You know, San Gabriel Valley, it should be a leader in regional transportation needs, especially for our seniors here in Monterey Park. We have a extraordinarily large senior population, and we also need to have the kind of scheduling, the kind of walkability for seniors to just go to. A lot of them live in the senior facilities. So, you know, we should have scheduling where they can walk out and they can be connected to the local bus stop. Also, as far as walkability, connectivity, we should be connected to places like the Marketplace, Atlantic Square, Shopping Center, downtown. We should be connected to just Langley Center, just have more access generally to the places that we need to go and the seniors need to go to take care of their daily needs, actually. Thank you.
Thanks, Delario. Next is Jose.
Hi, thank you for the question. I think that how we think about cars and how we think about infrastructure and what we do next really focuses on car culture. More parking lots, more parking spots, and that's only increasing our pollution. I think what we seriously need to think about in the San Gabriel Valley, and that includes Monterey Park, is just how we can get people off their cars, how we can encourage people to get on their bikes, how can we encourage people to use public transportation. And a lot of those questions I know are not easy questions. And I know that in California especially, we have a car culture, right? Everyone, who's gonna be the first one to give up their cars, right? But I would be the first to do that if I could get from point A to point B and walk to work or bike to work or take public transport to work. That would be amazing. And I think the impact that would have in our communities if we increase bike lanes, and it can't just be bike lanes that are just expanded, they have to have some type of connectivity, right? That, for example, if a kid wants to bike to school or bike to Atlantic Times Square or wants to hop on the bus to go to school or the bus or to work, I think those are great options to have, including transportation hubs. And that's stuff that I want to see happen in Monterey Park, and that's stuff that I want to see in the San Gabriel Valley. And I think the impact that it will have is the improvement of our health, our quality of the air, and just our environment in general. Thank you.
Thanks, Jose. Next is Vin.
Okay, well, thank you for the question. My response is going to be similar to some of the folks here. I think it is time for us to move into a different area here in terms of it's basically urbanization now. Even though we're in the suburbs, you think about transportation. The key here is with the environmental issues, with the dependency on oil and gas, we need to really reduce the carbon footprint. And what better way to do than start in the San Gabriel Valley? They're doing some of that in the downtown areas where I work, but in the San Gabriel Valley, we need to basically be cohesive in uniting public transportation, looking at the footprint on where everything is connected in terms of bike, car, buses, shuttles, and pedestrian walkways. So make it cohesive so that everyone has a starting point and an ending point. And at the end of the day, it's just making people aware that reducing the carbon footprint is important for everyone, not just for right now, but also for the future. And at the same time, release the stress of crowded streets, which will make it safer in all the streets, not only in the Monterey Park area, but in the entire San Gabriel Valley.
Thanks so much. And finally, Thomas.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't think you'll see a lot of difference between our answers and perspective on this question. I think we're beyond due in terms of thinking differently about transportation and mobility here in Monterey Park and the San Gabriel Valley. I think we're starting to see, thanks to organizations like yours and advocates like those that are on this call, a change in that kind of thinking and the dynamic that's there to move away from car-centric, at least internal combustion car centric thinking and planning to more active transportation and making sure there's an emphasis on public transportation and investing in those opportunities for more mobility in our region and in our city. As a council member, I would push to make sure we update and make sure we're putting in real solutions in terms of transportation or a new climate action plan, and making sure that either part of a climate action plan or a separate plan in terms of sustainability plan for the city in terms of laying out how we're going to address climate emissions, but also mitigating kind of climate impacts as well. And part of that, right, as Jay Shao indicated in his earlier presentation, transportation is a huge, right, the largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution in both Monterey Park and our region and the state. And so it's going to be a key part of addressing our climate emissions and our sustainability here in the city. And I'd push to make sure we have a solid plan with real actions, a strategy there.
Thanks, Thomas. With that, I'll turn it back over to Jay Show for the next question.
Yeah, thank you, Katrina. I'd like to get started with a quick introduction. Bus services in Monterey Park has been radically cut since the COVID-19 pandemic. The Spirit Bus was suspended for 2 years, being one of the last cities in LA County to restart their local bus system. Monterey Park's residents have been forced to rely exclusively on mass transit services provided by other municipal governments, such as Metro, City of Montbello. For half of their time in high school for Marquette High School students, they had to rely on their parents who had access to their own cars since buses were unavailable. Several seniors who are stuck at home have been unable to access the Langley Center. Many students and seniors have complained about the lack of public transportation. And even prior to the pandemic, Spirit Bus services has been limited and infrequent, while ridership has been paltry. That being said, buses continue to be the backbone of transit for residents without cars. So let's turn back to the candidates. What is your plan to improve the bus riding service experience and increase bus ridership throughout Monterey Park? And there's a separate part to the question. Though the Spirit Bus has restarted, would you prefer to keep the Spirit Bus program in Monterey Park or to consolidate Monterey Park's bus services into a neighboring city's system? We'll get started with Vin.
All right, so, great question here. So part of my due diligence is actually going to all these commission meetings. And I know the Spirit Bus started on July 1st. And in part of our research, I've been with the BDAC and the EDAC and the different commissions as well as Parks and Recs. They all have a comprehensive plan in terms of what needs to be done with the Spirit Bus in terms of the hours of operation, the rerouting, and the new routes. So for question number 2, the key is to kind of go back and redo from scratch, replan the route so that it connects the city in terms of where it does for the shopping areas, what it does for school hours. So it basically is the ridership of a lot of kids going to the schools, as well as for senior citizens throughout the day if they needed to go shopping. It currently doesn't go to the Monterey Park Marketplace, so that needs to be done. Remember, the routes were done 15, 20 years ago. And in terms of keeping the Spirit Bus or restarting it, my goal would be to keep it for the time being until we get the surveys from the residents and the plan of action. And part of that is crossing all the different commissions to figure out a better course of action, and then gradually expand and utilize the neighboring cities, because you can still have 1 or 2 routes that connects your own city, and then you use 2 other routes to intersect with the other cities, and you expand the entire neighboring city or even the San Gabriel Valley when time is up or when time's due.
There we go. Thank you, Vin. I'll pass it over to Thomas next.
Yeah, thanks. On the bus riding experience, I think we can all acknowledge, those who live in Monterey Park, that the Spirit Bus system has been not a great system for a very long time, and not one that really solves many people's mobility kind of needs here in the city. And I think I don't have necessarily solutions right here, but I think as Vin and others will probably note, I think everything needs to be on the table, and we need to kind of look at this comprehensive holistically in terms of where we can integrate with other public transit systems, and existing the metro system, monorail bus lines, and others that kind of run through or near our own system. And I think we need to look comprehensively at our own Spirit Bus system, right? You look at why people are willing and interested in riding public transit, right? They need the system to be safe. They need it to be reliable. They need it to come right more than a 30-minute interval, and it needs to be active when people are actually looking to go to the store or go to somewhere else in the city. And we need to look at how we can provide those opportunities and that amenity as a transportation service through whether it's Spirit Bus or some other system to incentivize our residents, right, and people in our city from driving their own cars. And whatever the solutions are, whether that is the Spirit Bus system as is or a change in that system, I think we need to be open to.
Excellent. Thank you, Thomas. And I'll pass it over to Delario.
Yes, the Spirit Bus has it's been a good system, but it hasn't been a great system, as a lot of things are here in the city. And of course, scheduling, there was poor scheduling as far as availability. As far as walkability, we need more bus stops that would say, hey, I'm easy to get to. I want to serve the community. I want to make it easy access to be on a bus system. And as far as keeping the Spirit Bus, by all means, we want to keep the Spirit Bus. We want to rely on it. We want to work on it. We want to have connectivity. I think that's the key to the Spirit Bus system, not only linking the Spirit Bus system to the different locations in Monterey Park, but we want to be interconnected throughout the San Gabriel Valley, giving it a real viable presence here in the city and in the San Gabriel Valley itself. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Delario. And I'll finally pass it to Jose.
Thank you for the question. There's no doubt that people were very mixed about the our bus system. I asked my students if they use the Spirit Bus. I asked my neighbors, and I got a lot of mixed responses. And there's no doubt in my mind that, especially among students who tend to be some of our most vulnerable populations in our city who rely on public transport, they really miss the Spirit Bus. But they also shared with me that they wish that the bus lanes were, the routes were expanded so that they had more connectivity. So I've created a student committee that's part of my campaign, trying to help me understand a lot of these issues, plus also young people in terms of keeping them involved and also asking them these questions as well. I live by Floral, by ELAC, and it's a big transportation area. A lot of people use Floral to get across, and I see the bus stops there as well, in some places and very inconvenient places as well. I think that I think we need to put the bus issue up for discussion and more debate. I would like to see it expanded. I would like to see the Spirit Bus be free for all Monterey Park residents as an incentive to try to encourage people to use public transport and reduce our carbon footprint within the city. I know I would use it. I know that my students would use it, and for students who are on a budget or have very little to no money, it being free would be a big incentive. Thank you.
Thanks, Jose. With that, I'll pass it back to Katrina.
Thanks. I think the next question is going to Andy Fung, another advocate from San Gabriel Valley. Andy?
Everyone. So like Jaysho said at the beginning of the debate, back in 2012, the Monterey Park City Council passed a climate action plan, which committed the city to 15% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2020. And the majority of these greenhouse gas emissions are from transportation. Considering that much of this transportation is in privately owned vehicles, one, do you see a connection between automobiles and climate change? And two, what is your plan to meet the Monterey Park Climate Action Plan and reduce greenhouse gases emitted by cars? So we're going to start with Thomas here.
Yeah, thanks for this question. Actually, my day job is working for Southern California Edison, where much of my work is focused on advocating for and helping our cities and our communities decarbonize the transportation sector. So essentially build out electric vehicle charging infrastructure and help transition more and more of our communities to zero emission transportation. There's absolutely a link between automobiles, in particular, right, the predominance of internal combustion engines, fossil fuel, right, oil, gas driven fueled cars and trucks and buses. And there's a need in the industry as a whole, right? The automobile manufacturers are transitioning and beginning that transition to more electric and zero emission vehicles. We need to help further that along. And I think we need to, as I said in an earlier question, redo our climate action plan, because most of that data and most of the action items in there are completely out of date, including a lot of the transportation alternatives and the solutions there. I think we need to redo our climate action plan and insert adaptation measures as well. And part of that is and needs to be building out the charging infrastructure that we need for the future, right, electric vehicles and zero emission vehicles that are coming as mandated by the state, right? By 2035, internal combustion engine vehicles will no longer be allowed to be sold in California. So that's coming. How do we make sure as a city we're planning for that, building out the infrastructure to support that?
Thank you. Moving on to Delario.
Yes, of course, revisiting the climate action plan would be a priority as far as greenhouse gases and the lessening of these gases. Of course, there's still a large percentage of gasoline stations everywhere, and there's a low percentage of charging stations everywhere. So by 2035, the electronic cars will be more prevalent, but we're nowhere near that at this time. So the push should be towards a better transportation system as far as the buses are concerned. And we should try to get as many cars off the street as possible through walkability to the bus stations, the bus stops, and also connectivity. We want to be able to go where we want to go. And of course, right now, only a car can get us there. And most of the cars are combustible engines. So our push on the city council should be to adopt any relevant climate action plan that we all can agree on and move the city of Monterey Park into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Jose.
Thank you. This question, there is no doubt in my mind that there is a direct connection between automobiles and climate change and pollution. And imagine if we were able to reduce not just the amount of cars that are on our streets, but also remove combustible engine cars and start transitioning into electric vehicles, the dramatic impact that they would have in a community like ours that is surrounded by freeways, the 60, the 710, the 10 freeways, and heavily trafficked streets like Atlantic and Garfield and Garvey. And not only that, we have schools that are against freeways, that are on heavily trafficked streets like Marquepo High School, like Inez Elementary School, that we need to think about as well. But I think that we definitely need to revisit our climate action plan. I think that we need to start looking at how we can reduce the amount of vehicles on our streets, how we can make streets a lot more greener. And I just don't mean by planting more trees. I mean by making the streets more pedestrian friendly, so people are more incentivized to walk in our streets, connects our streets using public transportation. But I think that if we don't do things like this, and if we don't come in with this different mindset and we continue to do status quo, we are entering a very interesting time period in human history.
Thank you. Moving on to Vin.
All right, so no doubt in my mind, there is a great connection with automobiles and climate change because of the carbon footprint I spoke about earlier. So, well, for the most part of my life, I've been trying to live as a green person. Just by background, I founded the environmental club, Help Our Planet Earth Club, back at Marquepo. Founded that club, I think it was around for a decade before it merged with something else. What we need to do in terms of a plan is to encourage public transportation. And as Thomas mentioned earlier, I'm gonna give him credit for that. We need to really review and also redo the climate action plan because it's outdated. It's data based on 15, 20 years ago. We've got a lot more new data to look at. And in terms of being part of the solution, with the electric vehicles coming online pretty much in all vehicles in 2035, let's encourage that. Let's have the city start by providing free EV chargers in the community to incentivize people from driving electric. And another action step would be to encourage the local residents, and they do this in downtown, encourage residents to carpool if they work in Pasadena or downtown. It's just a pool of commuters who work in certain areas that can carpool together.
All right, thank you. And that's all of the answers for this question.
Thanks. I'll take over the next one. Oops. The City of Monterey Park partnered with Bike SGV, now Active SGV, Baldwin Park, San Gabriel, El Monte, and South El Monte to develop the San Gabriel Valley Bicycle Master Plan. The plan guides the creation and maintenance of a comprehensive bicycle network for the next 20 years with bike promotion, education, and supportive policies. Good bike networks provide school-aged children and residents who cannot or choose not to drive an alternative to getting around town. In times of economic hardship, bike networks can provide a low-cost alternative for residents who cannot afford gas. Before the adoption, Monterey Park only had 0.7 miles of bike lanes located on Alhambra Avenue between Hellman and Newmark. Since its adoption in 2014, Monterey Park has implemented bike lanes on West Riggin Street from Gerhart to Ferdinand, 0.6 miles. Worse, Monterey Park received $2 million from LA Metro in 2018 to implement bike lanes on Monterey Pass Road, and the city has yet to do so. Currently, riding a bike is dangerous in Monterey Park. What we have today is a patchwork of unprotected bike lanes that are in the door zone. Under City Manager Ron Bowe's administration, Monterey Park has begun to plan for bike routes on Potrero Grande and Monterey Pass Road. However, the work remains to be done to transform these isolated patchworks into an actual system of mobility for bicyclists. Finally, some of the proposals fail to separate bike lanes from car traffic, endangering bicyclists and drivers alike. At this rate, we will not come near completion by 2035. So my question is, will you commit to pushing city staff to acquire funds for the bike plans, intended bike lanes in your district, even at the expense of space for cars? If so, how would you fulfill this commitment for funding acquisition and project implementation? We'll start with Delario.
Well, I think bicycle networks and transportation, I think that's a great idea. And I think we should encourage bicycle riding all throughout the city, all throughout the state, all throughout the country. But what I see using just plain common sense is that when I'm on the road with a car and a vehicle, I do see limited people using bicycles and using the bicycle lanes. So we also have to use our common sense and say, well, okay, if there's not a lot of people using bicycles at this particular time, do we really need to have that many bicycle lanes? So I think incrementally, as we as a society start to use bicycles more and more and more, I think then more and more we should push for bicycle lanes, an influx of bicycle lanes. So thank you for that question.
Thanks. Next, we'll go to Jose.
Thank you for that question. I absolutely think that we as a city not only need to add more bike lanes, but I think the bike lanes that we add have to be connected so that if students, for example, if students wanted to ride to school or go to Atlantic Times Square, these bike lanes need to be connected. The other thing is they need to be safe. I feel that I asked some of my students if they bike anywhere in Monterey Park and in Alhambra, and they just don't feel safe, they said. And so part of it is making sure and ensuring that these bike lanes are safe for pedestrians to see or to use, sorry. And the other thing is we need to we need to expand them to the point where more and more bicyclists will want to use them. If our city is interconnected in this fashion, I can imagine that even though we might get some flack, and even though we might get flack from not using, from taking away parking spots or anything like that, I think once people start seeing that these bike lanes are working, this is one of those what we call unintended consequences, right? It will have a positive impact in our community. I think we'll see a lot more people riding bikes. And I think that it would be a positive thing for our community, especially our environment in terms of reducing pollution. Thank you.
Up next, we have Vin.
All right, so this one is near and dear to my heart. So I grew up from 5th grade to 8th grade on a bike because I had a paper route in District 5 where I'm at right now. So I did that for about 4 years. And then with high school, I didn't have a car. So I actually biked to high school and I biked all over the city because that was my main transportation when I worked at the local restaurant, which is now Thai Paradise on Atlantic, right across from 99 Ranch. So yes, we do need better bike lanes, but we need to be a little bit more strategic because the way the bike lanes are built today, I hardly see anybody bike on Alhambra or on Reagan because it's not really safe, as Jose mentioned. What we need to do is be strategic and plan it. There's 17 districts in the city. You need to plan the district so that each section has its own variety of items for recreation, from recreation to just local bike rides to bike transportation to work outside the city or through the city. And even the folks who want to bike for long-term recreation, the adults who want to bike maybe 10 miles or so, have them loop around the city. You start that with the city, then you interconnect that with the other cities to have that plan. In terms of how do I continue to have this commitment from funding standpoint, is to give the accountability to the staff, assign someone in staff at the city who's going to take on this from a funding, from a grant level, and then make them accountable for a 3-year, 5-year, 7-year action plan so we follow up on it.
Thank you. And finally, we have Thomas.
Thanks. I absolutely would commit to pushing city staff and the city to make sure that there's an integrated San Gabriel Valley bicycle master plan that includes Monterey Park and that we're integrated in that planning, as others have noted. It doesn't make sense to have bike lanes in our city if they don't connect to other bike lanes and other active transportation opportunities in our surrounding cities and neighborhoods. In terms of funding and making sure this commitment is actually implemented. One, going back to climate action plan and sustainability plan, making sure the city produces this comprehensive plan that includes active transportation and the bike lane or bike master plan being an integral part of that in addressing car traffic and reducing traffic and addressing mobility concerns. There are currently growing and historic investments at the state level and even the federal level and locally with Metro in the region, investments that are being made and funds that are being made available for cities and jurisdictions that want to do bike and active transportation planning and implementation. We absolutely should. I think we've been a little bit missing in terms of those conversations and going after some of that funding that's available. I think more will become available in the years to come as climate, as this is seen more and more as a real and a serious climate solution. And we need to make sure we have all our ducks in a row and planning in place to go after that funding, to be competitive for that funding, and to be able to implement that funding to build out bike lanes, protected bike lanes, and active transportation networks here in Monterey Park.
Thank you, Thomas. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to one of my colleagues, Andy, to talk about traffic violence.
All right, thank you. So, so our next question, like Olga said, is going to be related to traffic safety. And before we start off with that, I'm just going to preface this with some information. So on this map here, we can see that from 2010 to 2021, Monterey Park has had 572 car collisions with pedestrians and bicyclists. So again, as you can see on the heat map, with the crash data, these collisions are concentrated along Garvey, Garfield, and Atlantic. Next slide, please. And here we see pedestrian and bicyclist car collisions around Inez Elementary. This map shows 185 collisions that occurred within a half-mile radius of Inez Elementary within the last 10 years. And it should be noted that Inez students would be directly impacted by the city's plans to expand driving lanes in Monterey Park because the school is right on Garvey Avenue. So now on to the next slide, please. Also like to draw your attention to Monterey Park's crash statistics for seniors. So here on this table, we can see that compared to other California cities of similar size, Monterey Park has, for the past years of available data, consistently been rated as among one of the worst for senior pedestrian safety. For example, in 2018, it was rated the single worst performer out of 102 similar cities for pedestrian fatalities or injuries in the 65 years or older subgroup. Next slide, please. So with that being said, how do you plan on keeping the most vulnerable population safe in our streets, particularly students and seniors? And what do you see as the biggest barriers to reducing automobile collisions with pedestrians and bicyclists? And for this question, we're going to start off with Jose.
Thank you for the question. And this is a question that I think is near and dear to my heart because I'm a teacher, and I know that a lot of our students that go to that are in our district attend schools, including Inez Elementary. It's one of the reasons why I participated in a walk with a lot of community leaders down Garvey Avenue to take a close look at how traffic looks like on Garvey. I'm not surprised. Our union president actually taught at Inez Elementary for such a long time, and she witnessed many traffic collisions among students. So it's not safe for students, it's not safe for the community, it's not safe for teachers. Same thing, the other reason is because I'm a parent of 3 girls who will be attending these schools. And I wanna make sure that if they decide to go to school on their bike, which I hope they will, or walk to school, or I walk them to school, that it's safe for them to go to school. I think that our biggest obstacle, at least the way I see it, is going to be changing our mindset, that we need to focus more on pedestrian and pedestrian safety than cars and expanding lanes on our streets. We know that that has been the same type of thought and thinking for a very long time, and that dramatically needs to change. We need to put pedestrians first and cars second. And the impact that that would have on our communities and our streets would be an increase in safety for our students and our pedestrians, including our elderly populations. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your response. Next up will be Vin.
So in part of my discussion with the different commissions, in particular Parks and Recs, as well as the Commission on Aging, is that yes, the seniors and the kids are the ones who are most vulnerable here. So what do you do to kind of help? Just like Jose said, you start with some type of education program and the mindset of people that, look, you got to be aware. And part of that is basically going back to the senior centers or the community centers or the parks and do a proactive safety course to let people know that when you walk, you got to be aware of cars. And we're driving in certain areas, you got to be aware of people either walking the streets illegally, jaywalking, or just not focused in terms of looking around. Everybody has responsibility here. There is no perfect solution to this, but what we do have is a mitigation to reducing the risk of these accidents. We're no different than any other city. They see this everywhere. So we need to just work with our residents and say, let's be careful. We work with our drivers. Let's be careful and have a course of action. Have the police department go out. I hate to see them give tickets to pedestrians or to motor vehicles for the wrong reason, but sometimes that's a possibility in terms of what they need to do to discourage these things.
Okay, thank you for the response. Next up is Thomas.
Thanks. I think this is obviously a huge concern for all of us here at this forum, and I think for many in our communities, particularly the vulnerable communities, including seniors and students that walk from their local neighborhoods to the schools every morning and the afternoons. It's, I think, has been indicated, there's no easy solution. There's no simple solution to this. I think it's a very complex problem, and part of it is just a very automobile friendly and leaning culture that we have, where cars come first and pedestrians tend to come not second and third. And I think we need to do a lot to change our culture and our mindset a little bit in our communities and our neighborhoods to make sure that we're redesigning and rethinking what our streets in our neighborhood should look like and how we can center pedestrians and people first as opposed to cars and vehicles, and rethink kind of how we think through mobility and design, and to make sure that people are first and centered in our planning and our design, as opposed to cars that have been so centric for such a long time. So very open to that, and would love to work with Safe Streets LA and others in the advocacy space on how we can redesign those, and also making sure we're including this in our climate action plan or sustainability plan, to make sure that we're doing what we can and being robust in our conversations and engaging with the community on these solutions.
All right, thank you. Next up is Delario.
Yes, we do have a traffic commission, and they have done a good job, but of course, across the board, nobody's really doing a real great job. So I did hear the statistics, and I see the statistics had reached a certain threshold. Now, I believe that with any statistic, once we reach a certain threshold, that should trigger an action plan. And that action plan should be implemented close to right away. Now, I know with all the gadgets we have these days, especially the cell phones, everybody's still tempted to look at their cell phone, regardless of how many warnings we get and all the advertising, well, we should almost teach cell phone safety in schools because, you know, there's kids on the sidewalks, they're not looking at one another, you know, running into one another. They're so involved with the video games and the this and the that and telephones that we should make a priority to make sure that people focus on limiting their cell phone access if that's possible. But, you know, everyone's responsible basically for their own safety. And you have to have your tail light burning at all times, not to be a statistic in this society. Monterey Park, any parts of the world, the cell phone is one of the #1 deterrents from being safe as vehicles, bicycles, cars, trucks. So I think focusing on the cell phone and the different devices that we have, we need to continue to focus and watch our own safety. That's our #1 responsibility as an individual. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's all the responses for this question.
Next, we'll turn it back over to Jaysho to talk about pedestrian infrastructure.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katrina. In terms of pedestrian infrastructure. So first question, what will you do to make walking more accessible for everyone living in or passing through your district? And what is your plan to equitably increase bus shelters and tree canopy in our city? First, we'll start with Vin.
Okay, so again, going back to what I said earlier, we need to kind of reorganize and revamp the 17 districts in the city to make it so that everyone has their own little section. The city is getting old, so there's a lot of gentrification within the city with the new buildings coming up. In terms of what we need to do with increasing bus shelters and tree canopies, you know, we did that for some time. Different cities have tried some of those plans, but what you do is you bring inevitably a different type of people who use them as shelters. The homelessness population increased to an extent because of that. And it's not just in the city, but you look at, I work in downtown. Every time I go to a bus shelter or drive by one, guess who's staying there? And, you know, there's some issues that we need to deal with there, and that's a bigger picture discussion. But what I would say here is we do need to build shelters, but we need to be directive in terms of what we're going to do with the shelters and how we're going to protect it so our residents can use it without being interfered with who's going to be there and who's going to distract them.
Thank you. Pass over to Thomas.
Could you repeat the question?
Sure, we can repeat the question. What will you do to make walking more accessible for everyone living or passing through your district? What is your plan to equitably increase bus shelters and tree canopy in our city? Okay. Sorry, go ahead, Thomas.
Oh, yeah. So in terms of making walking more accessible, I think, going back to a climate action plan, a sustainability plan, right, linking to LA County's existing sustainability plan, there are strategies there and metrics in terms of improving active transportation and walkability to make sure the city also is planning and working out a strategy for improving pedestrian access and active transportation opportunities, especially along the major thoroughfares linking major parts of the city and different districts in the city. I think we need to look at comprehensively, right, our sidewalk conditions, particularly in other parts of the city where it may not be safe for people to be walking, or particularly those who are in wheelchairs and other have other mobility hindrances. We need to look at that holistically and address those strategically to make sure people find it safe to walk. And part of that safety and comfort in walking in our city is tree canopy and making sure there's tree coverage and shade, particularly for our seniors and students who are more vulnerable to extreme heat as those impacts get worse and worse, as climate change impacts start to get worse. We need to do more to make sure our city is one that's more comfortable and we're able to weather more extreme heat events are going to be happening more and more often in our community. And part of that also is making sure bus shelters are improved and people have access to those. And just really quick, in terms of equitably doing it, I think we need to do it for all of our bus shelters. And as we redo our thinking and planning around bus and transportation options, we need to make sure that those are implemented throughout the city and not one district over another. And those investments are shared equitably.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. And I'll pass it over to Delario.
Yes, walking in the city of Monterey Park. Now, we do have the name Monterey Park as a city, and I don't believe there's that many trees, and we need to increase the tree canopy and of course the trees in general to at least 1,000 trees in strategic places, especially the parks. We can place more trees in the parks, and we can place more trees throughout the city. Now, as far as walking is concerned, I know a lot of the zoning is R1 and R2, meaning low density and medium density. And so that means that people are not getting out walking. So if we improved our Spirit bus system with the scheduling and the different connectivities, I think we could get more people out walking, because if they didn't want to walk, they could always catch the bus back home or wherever they want to go. So we have to be a lot smarter in enticing people to walk, inducing people to walk, and just to be overall a more healthy society and city. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you, Delario. Pass it over to Jose.
Thank you for the question. I think one of the things I would like to see, I walk around my neighborhood a lot with my daughters, and one of the things that been talked about was about infrastructure. Our sidewalks definitely need to be fixed. I know I push a double stroller in some parts of my neighborhood. I can't. It's harder to do that. I'll go onto the street and avoid the sidewalk. I think that's something that we need to do, especially for our elderly population who might be on walkers, might be on wheelchairs, not just parents like myself with double strollers. But also, I think that one of the things we seriously need to look at, and one of the things that my daughter keeps talking to me about, is when we're going to do this again, is repurposing streets. I mean, when we close down streets and have these amazing events that only happen once a year, they're amazing, and so many people come out. And I'd like to see that happen, not once a year, but often. And so the idea, remember we talked about changing mindset, of repurposing streets so that people are encouraged to go out on the streets and see the streets in a whole different light. And the last thing I'll say is just pedestrian, deals with pedestrian safety. I live on Floral, and recently there was a car accident about a month ago. During the car accident, one of the cars actually took out one of the bus shelters and what's it called, the bench. And if there were people sitting there, they probably would have died. They probably would have been seriously injured. So there's something we need to also take a look at, how close they are to the street and whether it's safe enough for them to sit there. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Moving on. We'll talk a little bit about Metro. So following the cancellation of the 710 freeway extension, Metro decided to redistribute funds to cities adjacent to the 710 freeway. It's allocated almost $100 million to the city of Monterey Park for mobility improvements. That's enough for an entire connected bicycle network. Unfortunately, the city council and the administration of city manager Ron Bowe has pushed to spend almost 100% of the local return funds on infrastructure for cars, like new garages and lane additions in Monterey Park's downtown business district. Lane expansions have already been approved for Garfield, Atlantic, and Ramona Avenue. Given everything we know about how lane expansions impact traffic, will you commit to retracting approval of previous lane expansion proposals? And will you commit to halting consideration of these projects to instead explore alternative and multimodal solutions to traffic that prioritize pedestrians, cyclists, and others who don't drive? We're going to start with Thomas for this question.
Sure. No, thank you for this question. I want to, I during those considerations at the council, I think not just me, but others on this forum as well, called in to express concerns and objections to some of the existing plans that the council were considering. I very publicly called for not retracting and not supporting the lane expansion ideas, particularly along Garvey Avenue. Right Park, and just from a practical perspective, even if we wanted to expand lanes in Monterey Park, if our neighboring connecting cities don't expand them, there's just it doesn't make any sense. That doesn't solve anything. And induced demand and the other concerns in terms of creating more opportunities for cars just don't make sense either. And I stick by it and stand by that. And I want to give props really quickly to our current mayor, Henry Lowe, who pushed staff and got the council to push staff to enter into further negotiation conversations with Metro and the county supervisor's offices to see if we can explore other multimodal and alternative transportation options with that funding that's being made available through the 710 funds in Measure R. I totally support those efforts and those conversations. I would love and would push to see more active transportation options implemented, and that funding would go a long way in building some of those out and providing alternative transportation options than cars in our city and for our community.
All right, up next we have Delario.
Oh, thank you. Well, $100 million to be spent is great, but the practical side of accepting any money and doing anything with any monies that's given, it has to be somewhat of a necessity. Of course, we want to move to multimodal means of transportation, but if the impetus is not there, we can do things like incrementally to get where we need to be. But at a time when there's money there, but there's not a demand to use that money for bike lanes. I think the demand is still on a car. And who's going to get a car? What kind of car are you going to get? What model? Until it's easily transportation and bus systems and mobility systems are easily accessible and easy to maintain and walk through, I think we're going to continue down the path of who's got the nicest car and what kind of car you have. So even with bicycles, for me, it's an athletic thing too. It's somewhat difficult to use a bicycle. When I think of going and riding around for 2 miles and 3 miles on a bicycle, sometimes I would probably rather play golf or go swimming. So I think there's other needs in the city of Monterey Park just besides bicycle lanes and that type of thing. I think we need an Olympic pool. I think we need a lot of other things that are prioritized over just something from Metro that they're giving us $100 million. Yes, thank you.
Up next we have Jose.
You for the question. I would absolutely retract the proposal for lane expansions. I think the solution to our problem is not more lane expansions, and I think we talked earlier about changing of mindset. It's really looking at other alternatives. I think that if we were talking about Garvey Avenue, for example, there's so many other things we could be doing in Garvey to make it more pedestrian friendly. We could be talking about adding a bike lane, a protected bike lane. Well, I know that there's a lot of businesses there, and Vin was talking earlier about revitalizing, that downtown area. One of the things that I liked about Pasadena that kept on after the pandemic was, repurposing those parking spots on the street to have places where people can eat outside. That's rather creative, right? Maybe a dedicated bus lane that would go through the city instead of another car lane. But the things that we look at and what we decide to do with the monies that are dedicated from Metro should not be to continue the status quo of adding more parking garages and more lanes, because statistics that only show that doesn't increase or improve our transportation or traffic at all, right? And it only adds to a lot of our pollution that plagues our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. And lastly, we have Vin.
All right, so Jose brings up a great point, and I think Thomas was also there a few months ago. We, the three of us, we actually did this walk with Safer Streets. We walked from the Inez all the way to Orange to see what the impacts would be with traffic and the expansion, and we had some speakers. So first off, for me, number one, you got to get that money. 100 million is not a drop in the bucket. You got to get the money from the county. And then once you get the money, you can start negotiations and you tell them what you want to do for the city. I don't agree with expanding lanes. I don't think Garvey needs more lanes. Garvey needs to revise the lanes for pedestrian, bike, and motor vehicle to make it safer. And I think a lot of the sidewalks, a lot of the on Garvey needs to be redone so that it's safer for everyone. The light system, the crosswalks, all that needs to be in place, because you want to showcase part of downtown, which is from Nicholson all the way to Inez. That's your downtown. You want to showcase it so you can have pedestrian, bike, and motor vehicles all living together. So in terms of how to exploit alternatives, we need to work with our EDAC and BDAC and our planning commission to have better solutions than what was proposed.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Katrina now for the audience Q&A.
Thanks, Olga. We got a short amount of time for, I think we'll shoot for 3 questions since we got started a little bit late. Our first question, and I'll just read it aloud because we want to have the timer on the screen. Our first question is, how many candidates have used the Spirit Bus to commute through the city? And if so, what are some improvements that you think could be made with the bus system? And we'll start with Delario.
Well, I've never used the Spirit Bus system, and I feel like people are still individuals and they still see their cars as a individual freedom. I believe if the bus system was adequate, if it had more frequent scheduling, it had more connectivity, if it had more availability, I would be glad to take the bus on occasion. But unfortunately, as an individual, the luxury of having an automobile at this time supersedes any type of thought towards any kind of a bus ride or anything like that at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Delario. Next is Jose.
I haven't ridden the Spirit Bus in a while, since before the pandemic, actually. But I do want to ride the bus more frequently. But I do want to say is that when I did get on the bus, I thought it was fine. I thought it was great. I did see a lot of people using it, in particular students. So I know that when my students told me that they use it quite often to get around the city, I thought that was important for me. But the other part is, of course, my family. I hope my daughters will use the bus to get around the city. And hopefully, as Ben was talking earlier about interconnecting our buses with other cities or maybe other routes, they can use the same Spirit Bus to to get them outside the city, perhaps even, or connect them to other parts of the city. So I do want to see how to answer the question to improve it, improve more routes, perhaps make it free so that we incentivize the use of our Spirit bus. Thank you.
Thanks. And next is Vin.
So I have not written the Spirit bus recently, probably in the last 4 or 5 years. I did before. My kids, when they went to Keppel, they rode it from Keppel to the library. My dad's used it just to go around the city. It's critical. I mean, I'm talking to folks at the local parks, the seniors at the Langley Center, the commissions for aging. They all use the Spirit bus to get around the city for shopping. That's what they do. So I do like Jose's idea of making it free. That's a great incentive for local residents. First of all, let me also thank the council for getting the Spirit bus back in action on July 1st. So that's number one. And then after all that, we need to really revamp the Spirit bus so that we can get different stops, different maps, different plans. Delario, the bus doesn't stop by your house, but if they have a stop by the marketplace, you should try it. I think you'll get a kick out of it.
Thanks, Dan. I still love driving a Porsche, you know, and of course the individual freedom, of course.
Thanks, Vin. Next is Thomas.
Thanks. Right, I haven't ridden the Spirit bus in a very long time, but as Vin kind of noted and others, right, the Spirit bus is a critical kind of connection for lots of students and seniors, those who can't afford or aren't able to drive anymore their own cars. And I think we need to do a lot more to make sure we're redesigning a transportation system, particularly a public transit system and a system within Monterey Park that serves the needs of our residents and particularly those that are more vulnerable in our community. And harking back to climate action and sustainability plan, I think we need to make sure that this is part of that, as I think we've mentioned in other answers to other questions, to rethink and make sure we're having mobility solutions on the table for across the board, including the Spirit bus and a public transit system. And part of that should be a survey of what the needs are in our community and how do we design a system that meets those and make sure that whatever this Spirit bus evolves into is something that meets needs for more and more in our communities.
Thanks, Thomas. And for the next question, I'm going to combine a couple of the audience questions we got here. Can you please speak about specific revitalizations that you envision for the business district along Garvey? And does this include protected bike lanes or pedestrian infrastructure? We'll start here with Jose.
Yes, I mean, I think I mentioned it earlier. I think that one of the things I would like to see on Garvey is protected bike lanes. I'd like to see work collaboratively with a lot of our local businesses and find ways that we can make our sidewalks and other parts of that area and repurpose some parts of the sidewalk for possible consumption, eating out, stuff like that. I'd like to see that. I mean, not expansion of lanes, but maybe even reduction of lanes. One of the, I know sometimes we talk about the unintended consequences. I don't think that it would cause more traffic per se. I think it would actually encourage more people to walk out, seeing that the streets are safer, cleaner, and that there's more pedestrians and people on bikes. I think it would encourage people, instead of driving to pick up food or to go out and dine, they would actually walk there. Thank you for that question.
Thanks. Next is Vin.
Well, I like Jose's idea. Garfield Garvey is the second most deadliest intersection in the city, right? And Atlantic and Garvey was number one, if I remember the map earlier. So let's turn that into a community zone where just think of Old Town, whether you have crosswalks, that is your downtown Monterey Park. Reinvigorate it, build some business into it, and have people walk, bike, and bring children there as the main hub of your city. So that would be my idea in terms of what to do. And as you're doing that, you need to also improve the infrastructure, work with the owners, the property owners, to put a little capital improvements in their building so it doesn't look as dainy and ugly and old. Again, that part of the city hasn't really changed in about 25 years. But if you revitalize it, you give people the incentive where they're growing their business and making money, and you're generating tax revenues, it's good for everyone.
Thank you. And next is Thomas.
Thanks. And I would say ditto to what Vin and so Jose largely said, right, in terms of rethinking and redesigning and reimagining, right, our crucial, right, economic corridors, Atlantic, Garvey, Garfield, and making sure that we're rethinking and redesigning what they can be in terms of being more pedestrian friendly. Vin mentioned Pasadena, right? Scramble crosswalks and other pedestrian friendly designs to help make it safer for people to cross streets, and slowing down traffic to help address kind of pedestrian automobile kind of impacts as well. Looking at bike lanes and protected bike lanes, not necessarily just on Garvey, but also right Newmark and other east-west corridors that are used and heavily trafficked, and seeing how we can connect those to other opportunities to reduce traffic and cars on the streets, to reduce the risk of impacts there. And also I would look at, I think Jose was getting at this, right, sidewalk widening and seeing how we can expand outdoor dining opportunities and outdoor retail opportunities to activate the sidewalks in our streets a little bit more for.
Thanks, Thomas. Finally, Delario.
Yes, sometimes I feel like it's 3 against 1. But anyway, I think I'm the only one that's been on the Economic Development Commission. I was served for 2 years, and then I think I did a good job, so I got promoted up to the Planning Commission from there. And one of the things that happened during the Economic Development Commission was we always were trying to improve the outsides of the buildings and the windows and those kinds of improvements. Of course, there's a lot of mom and pop stores there, and we were somewhat concerned about the taxes, the tax-based portion, that when you have an electronic system that automatically pays the taxes, that's going to be a much better system. But there are a lot of mom and pop stores there on Garvey. I think we need to look at the pavement. We need to look at the sidewalks. We need to look at the alleys. We also need to take a look at the parking, because if you're driving by, and want to stop, well, you're going to need to park. And a lot of times there's not a lot of parking availability. As
Thanks,
far as the
Delario.
bicycle is concerned, you can buy something, but you can't really take it on the bike.
Thanks, Delario. I think that's time.
Mhm.
We'll do one more really quick question. It'll just be a quick yes or no, and then we'll launch into the closing statements. Thanks to everyone for bearing with us as we're running a little over. We hope that you're enjoying it so far. Our last question is simple yes or no. As an elected official, will you commit to taking a non-car form of transportation, such as walk, bike, bus, or scooter, at least once per week? And for this, we'll start with Vin.
Yes.
Thanks. And Thomas?
Yes.
Thanks. And Delario?
Consider yes.
All right. And finally, Jose.
Yes.
Great to hear it. Thanks, everyone. Now, if we go ahead to the closing statement slides, each candidate will have 2 minutes to give your final thoughts, tell audience members where they can find you on social media or other places online, and please remind the audience what district you're running for. And we'll start with Vin.
Thank you for having us on here, and kudos, Delario, for serving on the EDAC commission a few years back. Vin Tngo, and my website is VinTNGO.com. It's pronounced go as in let's go. I've been in the city for 40 something years. I love it here. I grew up here. I'm involved with the city. I'm involved with the community. I do a lot of charity, nonprofit. I'm on a lot of nonprofit boards that help serve the city, brought vaccines, brought school back, the Garvey School District, was instrumental in getting a $40 million bond for the school. We went solar for all of our campuses just 2.5 years ago. Have brought a new clinic with Chinatown Service Center in terms of serving the local community on Atlantic. I drive an EV. I'm really promoting electric vehicles because I think that is the way of the future. And I think the city should incentivize our residents by having free chargers or reduced cost of chargers all over the city so that we encourage that type of modal transportation. We need to better our streets. We need to better our community. I want to first thank our prior city councilmen because look, this is volunteer for the most part. Everyone's done all they can to make it better. And I hope to have everyone's vote in terms of being the next council member to do that as well. It all comes down to serving the city. We're elected to serve the city, the residents. And I'd be honored to have your vote in terms of contributing and making Monterey Park better tomorrow than it is today and yesterday. So thank you for having me on.
Thanks, Finn. We'll take it to Thomas.
Thanks, and I'll just start off by thanking Streets for All and Safe Streets SGV and those that helped host and organize today's forum. Really appreciate this opportunity to address transportation and mobility options and opportunities here in Monterey Park, and appreciate the advocacy you have all been doing in Monterey Park over the last few years, particularly recently around some of the specific transportation projects that have been coming up in Monterey Park. I just want to say I was born and raised here in Monterey Park. I've continued to live here and chose to continue to live here and serve the community, both as an elected official and a city commissioner for over almost 15 years now. And I care deeply about this community and what it's going to be and what kind of community it's going to be down the line and for future generations. And part of that in terms of making sure it's a community I want to continue to live and work and play in is the transportation options and the ability for people to move safely and feel safe when they're walking or if they want to bike and if they want to get around town and do other things around town. And I think we need to, it's incumbent upon and a critical responsibility for the city council and city council members to make sure that that is top of mind. And that will certainly be one of my top priorities as a council member to make sure that we're improving those opportunities and keeping people safe as they want to get around the city of Monterey Park and connect to other cities. And a lot of that is making sure we're investing and planning for the long-term solutions to address these challenges we've gone over today. You can count on me as a partner, whether I'm on the city council or not, to continue to advocate for these solutions. But I hope to have your support as the election comes up just in the next few months to work on these solutions, to implement them and to make sure and keep those that are in decision-making roles, including ourselves, accountable to keep to implementing and making sure these solutions are successfully implemented. So look forward to a continued partnership, and thank you so much for hosting again today.
Thanks, Thomas. Next is Delario.
Yes, this is Delario Robinson, and I'm running for 6-5 as a city council candidate. You can find me on Google. You'll find an interesting background, a background of championship athletics, Oakland Raiders draft pick. Also, as far as the city is concerned, I'm very concerned about the city. I've been in city politics ever since I've been here. President of the Democratic Club, Monterey Park, for 9 years. I love the city. I love being of service. You know, I am a senior citizen, and I understand that we need common sense. The young guys, they're doing a great job, and they're going to be great, possibly city council people in the future. But right now, you know, I have a wife. I've been married for 26 years. I have 2 children. They were both championship athletically at Shearer High School. And I want to bring that kind of success to the overall city of Monterey Park. And that's why I deserve the vote to get elected to the 5th district in the city of Monterey Park so we can continue our growth through excellence. And thank you so much for having this forum.
Thanks, Delario. And finally, Jose.
First off, I'd like to thank you for the work that you're doing, and the dialogue that you're creating in our community about the future of transportation. I appreciate that. And I wanted to thank you for inviting us and having us here tonight to be able to share our ideas as well. I'm thinking about just how I want to see Monterey Park. I'm a teacher. I serve the students in this community. I'm a parent, proud parent of 3 kids. My wife is also a teacher. In fact, she teaches next door to me. We are heavily vested in Monterey Park. We're heavily vested in this community. We're heavily vested in the San Gabriel Valley. And that's why I'm here tonight. I really want to see Monterey Park work for its residents. I want to see Monterey Park be a better city that, when I leave my home to my daughters or this community, I want to inherit, not just my home, but this community. And I want to be able to say later in my life that I did everything in my power to try to give them a much better place, right? And so I want to say to Monterey Park residents tonight is, have an open mind, participate. Join our campaigns. If any of these candidates, if any of our, spoke to you, and think about, how you want to envision Monterey Park, and share your ideas, because I want to hear them. I know that some of these other candidates want to hear them as well. But a lot of that includes changing our mindsets, thinking about how we can make our streets safer, right? Think about your kids, think about your parents, right? Think about yourself, right? I want to have these conversations, and I want to thank you guys for taking the time to come out tonight and listen to us. I'm going to post my email and all of my contact information if you guys want to join my campaign, and then also just want to reach out and have a cup of coffee. Maybe we can bike there together. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jose. And thank you all for coming. We know it ran a little bit over and got started late, but really appreciate everyone's patience. Hope that you all learned a lot during this debate. We'll give the candidates a little bit of time to put their contact information in the chat. Additionally, you'll be able to find a recording of this debate on the Streets for All Facebook, as well as on the Streets for All YouTube channel. If you'd like to learn more about our work, or otherwise volunteer to get our emails, or like to join our volunteer list, please go ahead to our website and sign up. Again, thanks so much, and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you, Katrina.
Thanks.
Good night, everyone.